We're all just trying to get some people to do something. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter what your role is in the organization that you work for. We are all waking up every morning, going to work, and just trying to get some people to do something that we'd like them to do. It's kind of a nice unifying thought when you think about it. Everybody in the room, we all have the same job. We're just trying to convince some people to do something we'd like them to do. But here's the problem. People are hard to understand today. They're not behaving the way they're supposed to behave. Let me give you a couple of examples. I don't know about you, but when I was young, retired people, they sat in a chair, played with their photo albums, called their grandkids. And what are they doing today? They're jumping out of airplanes. They're climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. They're having the time of their lives. They're not behaving the way old people are supposed to behave. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Let's look at Gen Z. What's Gen Z doing today? They've discovered vinyl. They're listening to Led Zeppelin. That's not what young people are supposed to do. $1 trillion industry in this planet is the spa industry. $1 trillion a year spent on spa services around the world, and 50% of their revenue is from men. Kind of not what we think about when we think about the spa industry. A bunch of guys going out and getting a mani-pedi and a little pampering and having a me day at the spa. And the long-haul trucking industry. The largest growth segment for the workforce in the long-haul trucking industry is women. That's where all the new truckers are coming from. It's not what men are supposed to do, it's not what women are supposed to do, it's not what young people are supposed to do, it's not what old people are supposed to be doing. What's going on? It's really, really difficult to understand who people are. If our job is to get people to do something we'd like them to do, the first thing we need to do is figure out how to understand who these people are. Our old tools, they're kind of failing us. Demographics don't really help us anymore. But if we put aside all those typical labels and forget about those for a while, and instead start thinking about what these folks are all about on the inside, what their values are, well, then it all starts to make sense. Because you know what? Good music isn't about how old you are. It's about whether or not it resonates with your values. The job you choose has nothing to do with your gender. It has to do with what resonates for you, what resonates with your values. Values are the key to understanding why people are doing the things they do. So if we're here, all of us, united around trying to get some people to do something we'd like them to do, the first thing we have to do is agree that the current system of understanding who people are is not really all that great. It's not helping us anymore. So what can we do instead? Well, I want to tell you a little story. It's called 3 Friends in an Alley at Midnight. So 3 friends are out having a few drinks, haven't seen each other for a very long time. And these 3 friends, they've maybe had 1 drink too many, maybe 2 drinks too many, maybe 3 drinks too many. And the smart one puts up a hand and says, you know what, we got to get out of here. We got that speaker we got to go listen to tomorrow morning. We want to make sure we're bright and fresh when we get into that theater because it's going to be dark and we have a risk we might fall asleep. So they leave the theater, they're walking down the street, they're having a good time. And the first thing that happens when you leave a theater, when you leave the bar with your friends, after having a few drinks that you haven't seen them for a long time, is you're punching each other on the shoulder, you're telling old college jokes, you're having a really great time. And then suddenly these 3 friends turn a corner and there's a dark alley. And they have to decide, what are we going to do? So the first friend, the only thing we know about them is their primary value in life is adventure. It says, let's go down the dark alley. What a great way to end the evening. This is going to be amazing. We're a little bit drunk. I love you guys. Let's go. It's like it's been put here just for us. Second friend, the only thing we know for certain is their primary value in life is safety. Why would we do that? That sounds like the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Let's not go down the dark alley. Let's go back to the bar. We might have to turn on the lights. Who knows what might happen if we go down there? Let's not do this. And the third thing, the only thing we know about the third friend, the only thing we know about them for certain is their primary value in life is friendship. We don't care. We'll go down the dark alley. We can go not down the dark alley. I don't care. As long as we all stick together, because that's what matters most. We're a little bit drunk, and I love you guys. So the big moral of the story is, in order to understand how people make decisions about what they're going to do, because that's what we're all in the business of trying to get some people to make a decision we'd like them to make, All we have to understand is what their values are. We didn't need to know anything else about those people before it became very obvious what they were going to do in that situation. And you know what? Neither did they. Not one of them stopped and said, well, gee, I'm an 18 to 24-year-old male. I'm white collar. I've been to college. And one day I'd like to be married, but at the moment I'm single and I don't have any children. And therefore, I'm going to behave this way. That's not what we do. It's not what anybody does, except when we're in our boardrooms and we sit around and start talking about the people we're trying to engage and motivate and inspire. Somehow we think that information helps us understand who people are, when in fact it doesn't. If we get into the fields of behavioral science for a moment and get a little deeper into what's actually going on when people make decisions about things. So inside your brain is the prefrontal cortex. We're all familiar with that. People talk about it as the CEO of your brain. Inside your prefrontal cortex is a smaller piece that not a lot of people know about. It's called the insula. And the insula's only job is to make decisions based on incoming data. Now, incoming data that the insula is looking at are things like sights and sounds and smells and past experiences and memories and all that little gut intuition we have. So it's making decisions for us based on analyzing all of that data and comparing it against one set of filters. And that's our values. So something comes along that might be good for our family. If family is one of our values, our insula says, oh, that's great, go get that thing. And when we go get that thing, we get rewarded with a little dopamine hit. We all know what dopamine is. Dopamine makes us feel happy. If something comes along that's going to be bad for our family, we are told to run away from that thing. And until we do, we get punished by the insula. It sends out all kinds of chemicals that make us feel anxious and uneasy and maybe even a little bit afraid until we've managed to remove that threat to our values from our radar screens. So in a very real way, our values determine every decision we make all day long, thousands of times. What you are wearing right now, the fact that you're here, the career you've chosen, the person that you're spending your life with, all of these decisions were made because they align with our values. Let me make it a little bit more personal. I want to talk to you about what might be happening to some of you today. It usually happens when we're away somewhere. We meet someone for the very first time. We'll be on a vacation at a conference. You meet someone for the very first time and you just click. We've all had that experience, right? Put up your hand. Of course we have. It's a basic human thing. And you just look at each other and after about 15 minutes of talking, you're like, I feel like I've known you. Are you sure we haven't met before? You seem really familiar. Well, what's going on is you found someone who has the same values that you do. So something happens over on that side of the room over there. You both look at it. You're standing there at the reception last night holding your drink, and you see that thing happening over there. You can just glance at each other. You don't even have to talk because your insulas are both nodding in agreement and going, uh-huh, yep, that's, uh-huh, yeah, I saw it. I'm with you. Now imagine if you could have fast friends like that at scale. If the people that you were trying to engage and motivate and inspire and influence to do the things you'd like them to do, if you knew them that well, then your job every day would just be coming to work and doing things for your friends. We can convince our friends to do all kinds of stuff. We can plan parties for our friends. We could put ad campaigns together for our friends. We could design tourism destinations for our friends. We know what's going to make them say yes. And if we understand the values of the people we're trying to engage and influence, that's what we can get to. We can get to fast friends at scale, being a new way to think about people instead of demographics, which really don't tell us very much at all. So quick commercial, this is what my company's done. We've gone and turned values into data. Because so far, values have been very poetic. We choose pretty words that we all kind of like and say, these are my values, and these are our company values. And we put them up on the wall behind the receptionist, and we get very proud about those. But now we have data. So we've done close to 1 million surveys around the world with a team of translators in 152 different languages. And we've measured and mapped with more accuracy than you need for a PhD the shared values of everyone in 180 different countries on the planet, of about 186, 187 countries. So we've built the world's first global inventory of shared human values, and now we can use that information to understand the shared values of a group of people that we're trying to engage and influence and motivate and get them to do the things we'd like them to do. We found 3 really, really cool big things that I want to quickly go over with you. The first one is just confirmation that demographics are not our friend. Around the world, if we look at people inside any one of those demographic cohorts that we're all familiar talking about, age, gender, income, marital status, number of kids, and say how similar are the people inside those groups? In other words, how targetable are they with the messages, the campaigns, the products, the services we're putting together? It's on average 10.5%. Baby boomers only resemble each other, let's round off, about 10%. Gen Z only resembles each other about 10%. People who earn $100,000 a year only resemble each other about 10%. So Gen Z men who earn $100,000 a year, you stack them together, that's like 3 groups of people that resemble each other about 10% of the time, and then we go and spend $1 million because we think we know who those people are, and there's a 90% built-in fail. That's why we get so excited when we see a 3% return on a direct marketing piece. Like, whoa, champagne corks. That's a 97% fail, and we get excited about it because we're using the wrong tools. Conversely, if we put people into groups based on their values, the similarity of the people, the cohesion within the cohort goes up to as much as 89%. So people with similar values think about everything in their lives in exactly the same way. They're 89% targetable instead of, on average, 10% targetable. You think about this in terms of a dollar bill. You're going to spend $1 talking to a group of people and you use demographic ideas about who they are. You got about a 10% ROI, best possible case. You talk to them based on what you know about their shared values and you got an 89% potential ROI. It's an 89-cent dollar instead of a 10-cent dollar. I don't know about you, but I want to spend the 89-cent dollar. And all we got to do is think about people a little bit differently. The last thing I want to tell you about, the last third big thing we found from this giant database of the world's shared values is this. A very hopeful number. There's only 56 values. There's only 56 things that make us different from each other, all around this big, beautiful world of ours. At this moment in time when there's so much divisiveness and hatred and anxiety and stress, it's comforting, for me at least, to know that we're not all that different. Sure, people in different parts of the world with different kinds of attitudes and politics and jobs, they have slightly different set of values, but there's 88 keys on a piano keyboard. 56 values that map out the sum total of what's driving all of us all day to do everything is not that many. I find that to be a very comforting thought. And today, we're very lucky. We have organizations who are adopting this values-driven way of looking at the world. Organizations like PayPal and Google and Lululemon, the United Nations Foundation, the Environmental Defense Fund. These organizations are starting to use values to understand people. And word's spreading through stories that have been written about the work we're doing in publications like Forbes and Harvard Business Review and Inc. magazine. But I have to tell you, my biggest source of joy is that value graphics are now in textbooks next to demographics being used on campuses all over the world. The next generation will never know a world where we only think about people based on surface level characteristics. They will grow up knowing that what's on the inside is more important, or at least as important, as the same way we've been looking at people for the last 1,000 years. What does that leave us with? I'm not saying demographics are entirely bad. We still need them as a way to put a fence around a group of people. There's still a certain demographic reality around a target audience that we're trying to convince to do something that we'd like them to do, and that's fine. But let's stop there. All it does is put a fence around a group of people and say, here's their age, gender, income, marital status. It doesn't tell us who they are, it just tells us what they are. So let's keep using them for the who part, but not the what part. Psychographics, the second way we tend to look at people. Psychographics are a record of how people have behaved and felt so far. What are their preferences, likes, dislikes, purchase behavior? Have they visited my country, my city, my destination in the past? All great to know, but it's all a glance in the rearview mirror. So it's not really helping us, because that's like driving the car, looking in the rearview mirror and you can't see what's out the front of the car. We need to understand how to get people to do the thing we want them to do next, not the understanding the things that they did yesterday. So demographics are a description of a group of people, what they are, not who they are. Psychographics are a record of how they've behaved so far. And value graphics are the tool you can use to understand how to engage and influence and motivate them for what they do next. And so when I sold my company, I decided I was going to try and see if I could figure this out and figure out who those folks were. And the research, the journey we've been on since then, starts with this one quite beautiful little thought, that every organization on Earth, including yours, including governments, including somebody who sells hot dogs out of a stand on a street with some busy bars and nightclubs, we're all here trying to do the same thing. We're all just trying to get some people to do something. That's it. My friends at Hilton, my friends at Delta Airlines, all the DMCs in this room, we're only just trying to get some people to do something. The rest of it's just layers of bureaucracy and structure that we put in place because we're humans and we like all that stuff. But we all wake up in the morning, go to work, and try and figure out how to get some people to do something we'd like them to do, which begs the question, how do people decide to do something? So here's another story for you. It's called Three Friends in an Alley at Midnight because it starts about three friends who've been out having a few drinks, and they haven't been able to see each other for a long time because there's been a global pandemic, and suddenly they're able to get together like this and have a few drinks. So it's getting close to midnight, and they've had a few drinks too many. And they decide it's time to call it. It's not going to be a late night, they're going to go home. So they're walking down the street, they're being noisy and loud. You know how when you walk out of a bar when you've had a few drinks with your friends and suddenly your voices get twice as loud as they were when you were inside? That's going on. They're telling jokes that only they think are funny. They're having a really great time. They turn a corner and then suddenly there's a dark alley. And they have to decide what they're going to do. Now, friend number one, we only know one thing for certain. The one thing we know about friend number one is their primary value in life is adventure. Well, guess what friend number one wants to do? Wants to go down that dark alley. What an amazing way to end this evening. We're a little bit drunk. I love you guys. Let's go down the alley. It'll be so much fun. Who knows what's going to happen? And friend number two, the only thing we know for certain is that friend number two's primary value in life is safety. And friend number two says, why would we go down that dark alley? Don't be ridiculous. It's midnight. It's dark. We're a little bit drunk. I love you guys. Something might happen. Let's go back to the bar, turn on the lights, and call the police. And friend number three, the only thing we know for certain is friend number three's primary value is friendship. I don't care if we go down the alley. I don't care if we go back to the bar. Just stick together because we're a little bit drunk and I love you guys. That's the end of that story. The point of that story is that none of those people had to check in with themselves before making a decision to see what their demographics were. None of them had to say to themselves, well, gee, I'm an 18 to 24-year-old male with 2.3 children. I earn $50,000 a year, and I have an MBA, so I should behave this way. All they had to do was check and see, what do I care about? What are my values? And that drove the way they made a decision, whether they knew they were doing it or not, consciously or subconsciously. In fact, all of us, all day long, spend our lives making decisions based on our values. Now, behavioral scientists have known this for a very, very long time. For decades now, they've been studying this. And I'm going to try and summarize for you in 3 quick slides a lot of behavioral science research. It starts with neurologists. Neurologists study our brains, and I'm sure you've all heard this phrase before, that our prefrontal cortex is the CEO of our brain. Our CEO's job is to take all the incoming data, everything we see all day long, all the sights and sounds and smells that come along, and figure out what we're going to do about this situation. Are we going to go down that dark alley or not? Well, it turns out our prefrontal cortex, our CEO, only uses one set of filters to figure this out, and it's what we care about, what our values are. Which kind of makes sense, doesn't it, right? You stand back and say, well, gee, if family's the most important thing in my life and something comes along that might be good for my family, I'm going to want that. I'm going to run towards that. That's going to make me happy if I can get more of that. Something comes along that might be bad for my family, however, I'm going to run away from that. I'm going to avoid that. I don't even want to talk about that because it might harm something that I care about deeply that motivates my life. So that's the neurologists. If you talk to the psychologists, they'll talk about this in all kinds of different ways. One way, though, is to talk about confirmation bias. We've all heard this term. It's a fancy psychological term for a thing we need to avoid when we're building surveys and doing studies. Confirmation bias is the natural human tendency to say yes and agree with The stuff we already think is important, the stuff we already agree with. So if you're not careful when you're putting a survey together and writing those questions out, you're going to get flawed responses because you're giving people an opportunity to not answer really the way they want to answer. They're trying to answer in a way that gives them the confirmation bias that they're looking for. But what if we could flip that around? What if we knew what they cared about in advance, so that we wanted as much confirmation bias as possible, because then it would help us get people to do the things we would like them to do. I'm getting ahead of myself, but the point here is that psychologists agree. What we value determines every decision we make. All our values determine our behaviors, our decisions, and our emotions. And then sociologists, last one, and then we'll leave the science behind, because science can be a little bit boring sometimes. Sociology, that's what we do. We have a sociological data set that we've built that we do our work with, and that we've done some work that I'm going to share with you. Sociologists study large groups of people. Why did this group of people go and do this thing, and this other group of people go and do this other thing instead? It's always because of what they cared about and what their values are. This group of people valued this stuff, so they did that thing. This other group of people, though, they valued this stuff more, so they did this other thing instead. Quite simple. So here we are, all these different fields of behavioral science. They all agree on this one common principle. What we value determines what we do. If you only remember one thing from my presentation and our time together today, make it that line. What we value determines everything we do. We can't help it. We are biologically, neurologically, psychologically, sociologically hardwired to chase our values. It's what being human is.